So at the moment, we have a work in progress custom video player. Now, if we jump underneath our video element, I want to start creating our custom player controls. So here we're going to create a div with a class of player controls. And then inside, we're then going to start adding some behavior. Now, this is a syntax I like to use. This is called the BEM syntax, block element modifier. Of course, if you're writing with perhaps a JavaScript framework or library, you might want to use a more component-driven approach, but this is a syntax that I like to use for our plain JavaScript style code. Now, if we close off our div, inside we want to then start creating some buttons. Now, for these, I create them with a button type of button. Now, the class is going to be player underscore underscore and then play, and then we're also going to have a pause or stop button. Now, inside of our button, what we're going to say is an image, which is then going to reference an icon, which we'll then import in a moment. But first, we'll hook these all up with some nice alt text to make things nice and accessible. We can say play, pause, icon. Similarly, we also want to make our button a bit more accessible. So we're going to say aria-label equals, and then we can use the same value of play, pause, icon. Now, for our image source, we want to import our play icon. So let's jump up the top, and just underneath of our MP4, we can say import the play icon from, and this comes from our assets /image /icons, and then I've nicely named these as play.svg. So we can grab our play icon, jump down, and simply just bind it with some ES6 string interpolation. We can hit save, and we have a nice button that looks quite nice. What we can also do while we're here is create the stop icon. So instead of play, I'm going to change this over to stop icon. And instead of player underscore play, this will be player underscore stop. Our aria label and alt text can simply just be stop as well. And we can add the word icon in. Now, we don't want the icon actually in the aria label, so I'll remove those as accordingly. This then describes the image as the play pause icon, and this gives us the label of what the user can actually do with it as well. Now, we also want to toggle our play icon. When we start pressing play, we then want to change it to a pause icon to let the user obviously know that they can in fact pause, to let the user know that they can then stop and start. So let's go ahead and import our stop icon as well. Save this out and see what it gives us. So we have two nice buttons here. Now, one thing I want to do is jump into our style and start adding some more CSS for this. First, I want to create some styles for our player underscore controls. This is just going to simply be a nice display flex with an align items center property. So we'll save this out, and this now nicely aligns them in the center. That's vertically centered, not horizontally centered. Otherwise, they would, of course, be in the center of the page. Now, for our buttons, we have player underscore play, and we also have player underscore stop. So we can share the same styles for these. So all we're going to say is cursor is going to have a value of pointer. Now you can see that we have a black outline border as well as a gray background to the button. So it would be nice to just simply remove these. We can say outline is going to be 0, border can set to 0, padding will be set to 0, and the background, instead of just removing it, we can just say it's transparent. So when we save it out, we get a nice condensed looking set of icons such as this. And if I go and drag, you can see the clickable blue areas of where we can actually go and click on those buttons. So with that in mind, we now want to start hooking in some events. So once you've reached this stage, we want to jump down into our media events. Now, we covered these in the last lesson, and we don't actually need all of them right now. So we'll go ahead and just simply remove them. I'm going to comment out our media because otherwise it's going to give us an ESLint error. So what we in fact want to grab is our play button. Now I'm going to just call this play. We can say player and then make a query selector to our player underscore play. This, of course, if we command D, gives us a reference to our button. So we want to then go ahead and duplicate this to get a reference to our stop button. So go ahead and change this over to stop as well. So now we've learned in the previous lesson about these media events. What we actually want to do is start binding some further events to then change some of the properties on our media object. So if we take our play button, we can add an event listener, and we're going to say when we click on the event listener, we want to then run a function. Now for this, I'm just going to say toggle media status. I'm going to call it the status because it's either going to change it from playing to paused or paused back to playing. So we're in fact toggling the status of the particular media. And I'm calling this media because we can use the same APIs, and we'll do this towards the end of the chapter. And we'll essentially swap out our video for an audio file, and we'll see that all of the APIs are essentially the same, which is really nice. Before we go any further, let's hook up our stop event as well. So we can say stop, add event listener. We're going to listen for a click event, and this is just going to be a stop media. It's not going to be a toggle, which means that now we need to go and create these functions. So if we create our constant for toggle media status, we can create an arrow function, and inside the body of the function, we're then going to detect whether the media is in fact paused. You remember in the last video, we had this media.paused. So inside the body of the function, what we can then do is check if our media, so this is our media, which is going to be our video object. So if we in fact console log it first, we'll just refresh our memories. We can say media. We'll comment out our stop just for now to prevent any errors. We'll save this out and click on the button, and you can see that we have this video object. If we change our log over so we can then expand and have a look at the actual properties and go and click, we can expand our video.media. For this, I will just expand it slightly so we can see this a bit easier. Now we do have our paused property, which you can see has a value of true because it is currently paused. But we also have the prototype. We have HTML video element. So if we expand this, we're looking for a play and a pause method. We can then load some more. You can't see play or pause, but we have played and paused. So we're actually looking at the prototype of the prototype. You can see that we have an HTML media element. Then we have another prototype, the HTML video element. So the HTML video element actually inherits all of the properties from the HTML media element, which if we're looking at prototypes within prototypes, so we have a huge object by the end of things, we now have a pause and a play method, which means that we can actually start calling that on here. So because we have all of these properties available to us, we can say if our media is in fact paused, then we want to go and play our media. So we can simply call that method. So we can say media.play. And of course, this is just a tiny slice of what is available to us. You can see this text content, title, where we can give the videos names, the volume level. We're actually going to play with this in a moment when we create a custom volume bar. But this is a great way for you to explore in your own time. And also when you're building things in future is to look at the prototypes of things to see what you can actually do with them. So if we save this out and go back to a normal sized console, we can press our play and you can see that we can start and stop the video. You can see here that we have this play button which toggles nicely to a pause button. Ours doesn't actually do that. So what we're going to in fact do is change the image source. So now if we jump up the top, what we're going to do is import our pause icon. So we're going to toggle the actual image source when we start and stop. So we're going to use the play icon and toggle it over to a pause icon. So that is the image here that we in fact need, which is why I've added an alt text for play and pause, because it's going to be either of those. We could, of course, dynamically update this with JavaScript as well. I just kept it a little bit simple. So we've got a reference to our player __ play, which is this DOM node. So what we in fact need to do is get a reference to the play image. This we can then say play, give me an access to the query selector. So the play image, we now can go and update the src, our image source. And if we are paused, we want to change this over to the pause icon. Otherwise, we want to change this over to the play icon. So let's save this out and check it out over here. You can see that we are nicely toggling, much like the HTML video controls. However, you can see here that when we pause, we're not actually updating them here. So what we're going to do is essentially build out our custom video player UI, so you can then develop your own in the future, or perhaps use this as a nice starting base. And then we're going to remove the controls attribute to actually hide all of these, so then our users can just interact with our own custom video player. Now I mentioned that we're going to add the stop capabilities as well. So let's uncomment our stop and also finish off our stop media function. So we can simply say const stop media equals an arrow function. Now for this, there is no stop method. So we in fact need to use media.pause. And we also want to set the play image back to our play icon. So we can say play image source equals the play icon. Now, when we save this out, we'll see something interesting because we do not have the capabilities to in fact stop and essentially rewind to the beginning of the video. You can see that we can press play here and we can pause, but this built-in controls doesn't have any kind of stop button. Now, when I hit stop, I expect to jump back to the beginning. So if we start playing, we can then hit stop and it pauses nicely, but a typical stop actually rewinds straight back to the beginning. And the way that we can do this is by modifying the current time. So we can say media.current time and simply set it to 0. So we'll let it play for a few seconds. You can see that this white bar is then heading along. We can then press stop and it's now reset that current time back to 0 whilst essentially pausing it. So that is it for this lesson. We've covered quite a lot, and I think this is starting to develop into quite a nice and interesting project for us to start building out. We've then toggled the media status. We've looked at some of the APIs and events that we've explored earlier. We've looked at this new prototype, this play and these pause methods, and we started to look at how we can customize and change the behavior of a video, which will then help you build out any application that you want to with video in the future.